Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. When you think about scaling up a retail operation, it's not just about scaling up the number of stores or scaling up your e-commerce business. It's typically both. With that, welcome to Retail Growing Pains, balancing physical and digital channel growth. I'm Rebecca Goldberg, Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Sourcing Journal, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be here this afternoon. Especially as a former merchant, this topic is particularly interesting to me. We have a great panel of speakers here, and I'd love to let them take a moment to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their respective companies. Assad, you want to kick us off?
Sounds great. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. My name is Assad Ahmed, and I'm an industry solution advisor here at Oracle NetSuite. And I primarily focus on the retail and the e-commerce side of the fence. Just a little bit of my company's background. Oracle NetSuite is a full suite ERP, e-commerce, CRM solution for small to large enterprise-sized businesses, depending on where you fall on the spectrum. We have helped over 30,000 companies launch their enterprise systems and get them up and running and help them grow.
Awesome. Lisa, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Lisa Amlani, and I am the principal and co-founder of Retail Strategy Group. I'm also a former merchant. I spent about 20 plus years, definitely over 2 decades in merchandising planning, product creation, and then shifted into consulting in about 2018. Worked with Accenture in their Retail Strategy Group, and then in 2020, as you do, I started my own consulting practice. I found there was a really big need for consultants in the space who understood the end-to-end of product creation, of merchandise planning. And I really push speed to market and responsible retailing with my clients.
Amazing. We're so glad to have you here. I love reading all of your posts on social media. You do a great job. So keep it going. And Adam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi there, everyone. My name is Adam Lynch. I'm the COO at Breenlayer. We're which we started in 2010. We're a brick and mortar, omnichannel, and wholesale business. We have about 50 brick and mortar stores around the United States. I have a pretty broad umbrella under the COO title, but most, I guess, relevant to today, heavily focused on retail, run that entire part of our business, as well as all the technology operations and back end and logistics required to support that. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. We're all a fan of the brand, so glad to have you participate in your first Sourcing Journal event. So thanks for joining. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So just a few things on housekeeping. We're going to keep this, light. If you have questions throughout, please feel free to add them to the Ask a Question box, and we'll try to either pepper them throughout the conversation, or we'll get to them at the end as long as there's time. So please bring the questions. We'll hopefully answer some of them organically. So we've heard a lot about the retail apocalypse in recent years. And while that makes for a catchy headline, it was really more of a narrative than a reality. Retail really is not dead, it's evolving. And because of that, it is growing. After the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated digital sales growth from 26.4% to 4.2 trillion in 2020, e-commerce has more room to run. The online channel is expected to jump from 17.9% of total retail sales in 2020 to 23.6% by 2025. And on the brick and mortar side, there is still plenty of growth opportunity to go around. With retail store openings, and we're going to talk about this in just a bit, up 12% year over year, it's clear that there's not only the predictions that were made about the death of the store were really, in fact, over-exaggerated, and stores are really still increasing. So really interesting to see that, and we will dive in a little bit further there. Additionally, while e-commerce sales have jumped 44% over the past 2 years, since the start of the pandemic, brick and mortar has held its own as well, with 20.2% sales increase to over $1.5 trillion. But if there's more evidence needed than balancing retail channels balancing retail channels, is crucial, omni-channel consumers are willing to spend more. And we know this through research. So McKinsey & Co. estimates that omni-channel consumers shop 1.7 times more than single channel shoppers, making these people extremely, extremely valuable to brands like Marine Layer and to other brands that we'll talk about today. Look no further, for example, Chico's, a brand that I think a lot of people are familiar with, where digital sales growth are 177% higher in Dallas and 60% higher in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, than in comparable markets with no stores. So if that's not proof enough, I'm not sure what is. So with that, let's get it to our panelists and have a bunch of questions that we'll start with. So let's start with Lisa as our resident retail analyst. I know that you work with a ton of retail brands. We just showed the audience that brick and mortar is growing, but do you often see that retailers feel pressure to grow and open maybe before they're potentially ready? And what are you seeing when you work with brands, maybe both small and large?
Well, I've seen a lot, but what I will say is that I find there's a lot of pressure for digitally native brands actually to open more stores than ever before. And we've seen a lot of brands, and I'm not going to name them because I think we know who they are, that, they've kind of scaled back. And what that tells us is that they scaled too quickly. With talking to these brands, what I've learned is that they were missing a lot of retail fundamentals that a lot of us who've worked in stores were possibly missing. So things like automatic replenishment, things like having merchant planners that have actually worked with physical retail, who understood, about curation and localization of assortments. Who understood how important it was to have, really product obsessed brand ambassadors, but who also understood that it was important to develop a relationship with the customer, a deep one as well, where you could capture insights, learn about their product journey, if it was seamless, if they were delighted with product, and if there were gaps in the assortment. What I've seen is that there was a lot of challenge around inventory with these stores. And if you scale too fast and you don't have the right infrastructure in place, a flexible supply chain, real-time visibility of inventory, or transparency within the journey of your product, you're going to miss the mark, and you're going to miss it.
Sorry, did you want to say anything else, or are you done with that comment? You cut out for a second for me. Good. All right. So Adam, as a follow-up to that, maybe, I'd love your take on this, and given your experience building a brand that was, direct to consumer from the ground up, did you start Marine Layer, immediately adding stores? What was your plan, and how did consumer demand maybe impact your opening up of stores and your strategy there?
So interestingly, we sort of went with an alternate plan. We were retail first from the beginning. We opened our first store in 2010 in San Francisco. Here, it was a little 450 square foot, essentially t-shirt shop that Mike and I, my business partner, were working in. And honestly, I wish I could say it was part of some grand strategy or very well thought out plan. It really was more a function of it was the only thing we could sort of get our arms around for how to operate. We were super limited capitalization, so. This was in 2010, so we're coming up, I would say, in the wake of some of the first DTC darlings like Bonobos and some companies like that. And the whole idea was like, hey, we're just going to go online. There's no overhead. This is going to be easy. And I think that the more complicated truth of brands who are trying to scale very, very quickly in DTC is you need a lot of money to spend on acquisition, and you need a lot of the sort of calculus involved there involves some pretty lofty assumptions on things like lifetime value and how you're going to make that money back. For us, retail just made sense. We could, our rent was $4,500 a month. We said if we can sell $30,000 a month, we'll be, there was a requirement that we be profitable from day one, essentially. And so on the flip side, we came to DTC actually pretty late. We really didn't lean on that as a channel in terms of acquiring customers and driving serious growth until much, much later. So we were really a retail first company from the get-go.
Got it. And as a follow-up to that, can you talk a little bit about your current channel mix today? Has this mix benefited your ability to acquire new customers, retain them, build lifetime value? And I don't know, maybe did the pandemic shift anything as well? So kind of a multi-pronged question there for you.
Yeah, it did for sure. So, we're very happy with our channel mix now, to be honest. We're about 50% e-commerce, 35% retail, and 15% wholesale. The wholesale business has been the most recent channel that we've begun to develop in earnest, and we have a couple really important strategic partners in Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's, which we think add another layer actually of sort of brand exposure and customer acquisition that we didn't have before. But in terms of customer acquisition, I had my CMO pull this before. In 2021, we acquired 56% of our customers through DTC, through online. So their first purchase was online, and 46% in retail. So retail is a hugely, hugely important piece of our new customer growth. In terms of comparing them, it's sort of the second part of your question, like retention, lifetime value. I can validate the data point you were sharing earlier on. We find that our customers who are cross-channel buyers, like we know if they participate in both channels, they're more valuable. For us, it's 1.7 times. It's actually very close to the 1.6 you said. And we get about 38% of our revenue from about those 17% of buyers that are willing to participate cross-channel. And so often the way we think about the progression is that we might acquire someone in retail, we get their email address. We're very, very happy to then have them make that progression into Omni. We get them a catalog, and that's like a very nice customer life cycle for us. And we know that having both run well is very, very good for retention and lifetime value. So we feel pretty good about that.
Really interesting. I actually, when I was preparing for this, I actually didn't realize that you were in department stores, because I haven't really been spending a lot of time, at Nordstrom's recently or on their website. I've been kind of going straight to the brands I love. So interesting to see that as a growth strategy, that's still really important. Are you assorting similarly in those stores as well? Or are you giving kind of new product to those locations?
It's mostly similar. Yeah. And to work with some of the larger strategics, they're going to try to push you towards assortment parity. Like they're going to want you as much stuff. And we're starting to do some type of, special units with our, larger programs with some of the bigger partners. But yeah, it's mostly the same stuff actually.
Great. And flipping it aside, we'll come to you in a second. I know that you've got a lot to say, but Lisa, one question for you. Do you think that retailers really understand how to measure the value of that brick and mortar store? Kind of like what we're talking about as we were waiting to start the webinar about, sometimes the stores don't necessarily, you don't get all the credit in the purchase. How should retailers really think about approaching and optimizing these locations to attract that channel customer that we were just talking about?
Yeah, I love this question because, coming from physical retail and then, into this omni world, we didn't even call it omni when I was, back in the day at Ralph Lauren. But what we learned is that KPIs are shifting even from a physical retail perspective. So when we think about the KPIs that are coming out of digital, of social commerce, and of course, omni, if we kind of look at the KPIs as a whole, part of the ecosystem, in a channel-less world, what we'll find is that the traditional KPIs like sell-through, which we'll obviously keep, and looking at gross margin, but we're going to start to look at customer lifetime value. The KPIs that are traditionally digital, we're going to look at them in the physical world, and vice versa. Because what that's going to do is it's going to leverage insights and then drive decisions through data to make better decisions across merch planning, marketing, and of course, stores.
Makes sense. Adam, one more question for you here. The halo effect is when a retailer with a storefront is in an area experiences a boost in their e-commerce within a certain radius. As I mentioned, I think with the Chico's example, can you explain how Marine Layer uses its stores to boost these e-commerce sales and vice versa? I think you started touching on this, but maybe you can dive a little bit further into this.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the email address, which is it's basically
Right.
just almost as valuable as someone's home address now. And I guess we're big believers actually. So we have a very big direct mail business as well. So physical catalogs, we were very early. I guess in my opinion, we were very early back into the game. Now your mailboxes, and I apologize if you're a Marine Layer customer and you now get 30 catalogs, because those two things are actually related. That wasn't the case 6 or 7 years ago when we started doing physical mail in 2014. When we started doing direct mail, it actually was still sort of out of favor. And we thought it was just a nice opportunity to tell a story and have a little bit longer, more drawn out brand moment. We also know for sure that catalog acquired customers are much higher value and have much higher average order values than like a digital ad acquired customer. Tying that back to your original question, we get email addresses for 80 to 85% of our customers that come into a store and make a purchase. Our associates are, I would say, very skilled at just sort of helping them understand the value of giving us their email address, which is really easy receipts, 365-day returns, ability to look up their orders like across any different store, wherever they are. What we can do with that is using some of the crazy data mining services that are out there now. We can get a physical address for most of those people and then get them a catalog. So again, that just speaks to the earlier point of like, you're trying to just take people through this longer sort of value building journey through the brand. And that's the primary way that our number one zip code, and just to your other point on the halo effect specifically, it for sure is true, right? Like 100%, we open a store in a place, that MSA or those 5 or 6 zip codes will have massively outsized e-commerce growth relative to the run rate of a non-store trade area. And I always joke with people who've been customers of the brand for a long time. 94123, which is the zip code of the marina, is the number one e-commerce zip code. This is like a zip code that's like a half a mile around our original store, and it's the largest e-commerce zip code. Like people 100 feet away from our stores are spending $500 online because they don't want to walk 100 feet down to the store. So it's for sure, happens very predictably.
Super interesting. I spent a couple years working for Victoria's Secret, and when we still had a catalog business, that was more important than any other channel. And I mean, I used to paginate those catalogs, and I loved it. And to this day, I think I probably still have some of our best holiday catalogs, which probably, some of those catalogs drove more sales than I think anything else. So I guess the catalog isn't dead yet either. So probably an opportunity for other brands to think about that. All right, Assad, when we talked before, you have a lot to share about, advising companies. So let's get some thoughts from you. Talk a little bit about implementation of back-end technology. When it comes to technology that retailers and brands are using, do you think companies integrate brick and mortar and e-commerce in the right way? Where are people falling short? What have you seen from your work? I know you've been busy lately.
To answer your question, Rebecca, you said, do companies integrate the right way? Well, NetSuite customers do, right? Let me elaborate on that one. It's getting aside from that one. I think it's kind of, again, Lisa was talking about it, Adam was talking about it. When you talk about retailers, you kind of start with a singular strategy. As you see growth come in, diversification starts to happen at that point in time. What we have seen when we start working with a lot of the retailers is that they start off with a singular solution. They'll start off with a bespoke solution. They're like, hey, I'm going to be an online store. I'm going to have an online presence. I'm looking for a very bespoke solution that needs to look really cool and needs to look really good. And as you start going through your growth phases, then you start adding in additional things. Some of them go in and build out a retail location. When you build out a retail location, first thing you do is like, hell, I need a POS system. Well, let me find the best POS that will work for me over here. You got to put that together. Now you have a website and you have a POS. It's in my hands now. And then once you start doing that, then comes the part is like, well, I need an inventory management solution. So let me go find the best one for that. And when you can start doing that, when you're piecemealing Frankenstein on your part, and what you find out soon, and a lot, this is where we start working with a lot of those D2C darlings that you'll talk about, a lot of the small companies that go through that hyper growth phase, be whatever kind of retail that they're in, is that they start soon finding out it's like, well, X doesn't work with Y. There needs to be a bridge that needs to be built out. And you can start piecing together a lot of, I always like to say, I come from a world of engineering. So duct tape and WD-40 fixes into the mix, right? Duct tape is never a good solution, except for a few, but we won't talk about those. So when you kind of start building those things out, you, you can start seeing parts of the picture, but you're never able to see a full picture, and that's what retailers tend to struggle with. Uh, we mentioned the word omni-channel a bit earlier. Omni-channel is the theme of the year, right? Is the theme of retail, is the theme going forward as we see on our side. And when we talk about omni-channel, and I'll talk about it later on as well, it's not only customer facing, but it's also enterprise internal facing. Your employees need, as for the retailers, need to see those bits of information as well, and it's very critical for them. When we work with our customers, the way that NetSuite solution is put together, it's really a modular solution. When you're starting out with, and Adam kind of mentioned this earlier part of it is when you grow when you're building your company out, building your retail channels out, you only have so many dollars to work with, right? You can't buy everything in one day. Rome wasn't built in one day, and neither is your retail enterprise going to be built in one day. With NetSuite, what works out is we have modular solutions. You can start with smaller bits and pieces, financials, you add inventory, you add commerce, you add things. So when you have retailers have a bigger vision and a bigger view, and that's what we really like to advise them on our part is you have to think not only immediately, but 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road.
Fascinating. And I mean, just speaking from experience, I think so much of what's daunting too is the transition to new software too, right? Like, you know that you need to actually make the move, but then to try to get your teams. And I mean, I can't tell you how long we're like, this is going to be a 2 month, transition. And it's like 9 months later, a year later, you're still like planning in two systems, or you're still working in two systems, and you're trying to straddle data in two different places, and they don't match up. So I think, I anticipate, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, that some of the fear is actually having to actually make the change too.
100%. I would say even 110%, right, on that one. If technology is fearful for most companies, again, when we would work with a lot of our retailers, they're focused. They're very good at building their product lines. They're very good. If you're talking about clothing, if you're talking about fashion, they're very good at doing that. They've never built retail. They've never built enterprise systems out on their end. So when you talk to them about it, it's the fear is there for sure. And this again, and I'll do a very shameless plug-in for our solutions on this one, is we have worked with 30,000 different companies over the course of 20 years. And what we've done is we've brought our experience in for our retailers and saying that we can do this for you in a very simple fashion. These are the best practices. And try to align them with those best practices. And what we see is 90 to 95% of our customer base lines really, really well with that for them. And just makes that transition much easier. And then all of a sudden, technology is not that fearful thing anymore.
Makes sense. Yeah. Change. Oh, no one likes it, but at the end, I'm sure it's worthwhile. So, Lisa, I'd love to come back to you. You've often talked about how consumers often don't see the channel at all. They just see the brand, right? Which, Adam was talking about earlier too. How can retailers and brands better create personalized and consistent online and in-store experiences that differentiate their brand and make them stand out? Does it come to just product? Is it curation? Is it experience, something else? What do you advise, and what are you seeing work?
Well, I would say the first thing that any retailer or brand has to do is put themselves in their customer's shoes. So go through the customer journey, across channel, social, everything, and figure out what those friction points are. Because the point of having, an omni-channel journey that delights, and whether it's through product or the experience, is that it should be seamless, and the customer shouldn't feel friction or frustration as they shop digital first, as Adam said. Even the store that has the most customers in its proximity, most customers are digital first. That's where they're doing their search. That's where they're engaging with the brand. Look at Nike or Lulu or any performance brand that has a fitness app or a connected app, or even Levi's, I think, does a really good job where it is seamless. The customer, it's one single source of truth of the customer. But the fact is, no matter how the customer is engaging with you, it should be seamless, it should be transparent, because as soon as that customer feels friction, they're going to move on to the next brand, where there are so many more choices than we've ever had before. Even as a consumer, that if I'm going to feel friction, I'm not coming back to your store. I'm not going back online, because I can shop elsewhere. I have access to global brands now, and I didn't have that before. So I would say putting the customer in the middle, iterating until you get it right, and keep checking on that customer journey and what does it feel like to actually use the chatbot online, or actually go through a purchase, and feel that pain, I would say, and then act on it.
Right.
I would want to interject for a second
Yeah.
and echo on that. NPS score is it's like the thing we track more religiously. I mean, we'll talk a little bit later about some other key metrics and data. That is like, we hold on to that score and tracking that more than we do anything else, because it's like this instant feedback of that entire journey, basically, is what, whether someone is willing to say, yep, I had a great experience, 1 to 10 or 0 to 10. Are you getting an 87 or an 84, or, where we want it to be? And when we see little tiny dips in that, I swear we have meetings and be like, what's happening? What are our response times in customer service? Is there a queue in some of these stores where stuff is not shipping out fast enough? Like, what's going on? Or is it fit? Is there, it's like instant feedback. So it's one just I wanted to throw in there that we track very, very religiously.
I'm curious about that. How often is the data skewed because you're getting more of the customer that's not happy versus the customer that's satisfied? I always wonder, because when I get surveys, I usually fill them out when I've had a bad experience, but less so when I've had a great one. I personally try because I know how important it is, but is that a variable that I don't know exactly how it's calculated?
I think it's a totally fair point. I guess maybe what I would offer is it's all, if on a relative basis, the same people are just answering it week over week. And, you get random emails, right? Which is like, would you recommend this brand? And they go out through a service. If even the super promoters were going from 87 to 82 or to 78, then we're worried, essentially. So, hopefully it's hitting the same people on a month-to-month basis. But that's a fair call out. It's not like perfect double blind, study necessarily.
For sure. This is totally tangential, but something that I still think that there's a huge opportunity. So I don't know, Assad, Lisa, take note, is return forms. So companies that still use traditional return forms for apparel or footwear, they give me the worst options, like too big, too small, and or like wrong style. I'm like, you have the opportunity to get so much more from me in this moment, and you're giving me the worst choices so bad that I might just give you the same choice for every product because it's the easiest box. And whether it's an online form or whether it's an old school paper form that I get with my t-shirts or whatever, I'm shocked that people still find that information helpful. Or maybe they don't use it. Maybe they're just too lazy to reprint the form. But someone's got to figure out a better way to get that data from me, because when that garment is on me, and I'm telling you, it's not just too short, the dress, the inner, layer is actually too tight. I'll tell you that if you ask me that in the moment. And if you want me to just record it my phone or something, I'm willing to do that as a consumer if it helps the next person. So opportunity for sure with the return form, if anyone wants to take note, or if anyone's on the
Yes,
call.
I would
Should.
love to pipe in on this because, this is something that I am a huge advocate for, is capturing customer feedback and closing that feedback loop. I think that there's a comeback for, the call center, I think, right now, because it's become a data hub. And imagine all the customers that are calling about product. And as soon as you understand how to attribute that product, or that product feedback, whether it's sizing or fit or even aesthetic, we can actually take that information, that data, capture insights from the data that will directly inform product decisions. And in most cases, it's in real time. So
Right.
imagine how valuable that feedback is. And if we can actually close that feedback loop and inform the customer, hey, we heard you and we're going to make a change. And then as these, call centers or even retailers and brands, no matter how they're capturing that feedback, as they start to aggregate that feedback, they may realize that, we're actually not selling this size run at all, and we need to add extended sizing, which actually becomes like that they become more inclusive. So I
Right.
think that there's so many opportunities to do better, especially around customer feedback. You can tell I'm super passionate about this,
Yeah,
but
no,
I
I
think
think
that this is a huge opportunity.
I couldn't agree more. Touching a little bit about, we've been starting to touch on the customer experience, and one of the things that we obviously at Source Digital talk a lot about is, sustainability and recycling programs, post-consumer waste, things like that. Adam, I know that at Marine Layer you've got textile recycling programs in your stores, which I see pop up, at other stores as well. I also saw that you recently, I don't know how recently, but that you have it online too, which is pretty cool. Has this supported any of your business strategies at all? Does it help one channel more than the other? Are you, doing it just to kind of be part of this, or are you actually seeing some kind of return on this investment? Because I know it does take some effort to get this going.
Return TBD. It's expensive. But so this
Fair
is
enough. I'm glad you're honest.
Yeah. The program is Respun, and we launched it 3 years ago, and essentially, what we think makes it unique in the market is it's a take back program for t-shirts. So we take up to 5 t-shirts back from anybody. You actually don't even need to be a customer, and they don't have to be Marine Layer t-shirts either. It's just like 5 t-shirts, throw them in a bag, give them back to us. We give you a recycling credit for them. So far, we've given out about $2 million worth of recycling credits to existing and new customers for those donations. So it works out to about 400,000. It's actually, we've collected about 500,000, because sometimes people send us like 30 shirts. We still just give them the $25, but they send us a huge bag of like every, fun run t-shirt.
Thank you for all your bad sports t-shirts.
Yeah, no, we get some pretty hilarious ones actually. But it's a mix between the 2 channels. Some people will request a kit online. Sometimes we'll do pushes for a short period of time, where we'll do like a ride along program where every single order for 2 weeks will actually get a prepaid mailer. It's just like, send us your t-shirts back.
Yeah.
You'll just get an email with a $25 credit to use on our website. We prefer to drive it in store for numerous reasons. It's a lot cheaper because collecting in bulk in a store, packing them up in a box and sending it is much, much cheaper than sending it 5 shirts at a time all around the country via USPS. It also generates traffic and engagement in the store. I mean, that should be, I guess, pretty obvious, but we have these like funky mailboxes. I remember when we bought these mailboxes, we called the place that makes mailboxes, which is in Minnesota. And we were like, we need 50 mailboxes. And they were like, who are you? Like, why do you need 50 mailboxes? So we have, we collect them in those things. And it's a little bit better of an end-to-end experience where we can get them in there. They can use the credit in the moment in the store, which is a great thing for conversion too. So I would say we prefer it to be a retail first experience, but I think it's about 50-50 actually in terms of the customer participation between doing a kit online and shipping it and doing it in a retail store.
Got it. Lisa, are you seeing other people that you're working with try to activate some of these things as well, or are you seeing similar programs with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sustainability as a whole is such a major push in retail right now because I think customers are starting to hold retailers and brands accountable. So, Adam, I love the fact that you have this in place. And what I would say to you is that it's great that you're educating the customer that circularity and sustainability is important to you as a brand. Eventually, what I'd love to see is more in store, just because, are we offsetting the carbon footprint by, using, this delivery service and of course the packaging and everything involved. But I think changing the mindset of the customer is key. And so I love that you're doing that. I'm absolutely seeing this across the board. I'm also seeing a lot more chatter, let's call it chatter, mostly because I push it, I think, about how we're actually developing product and going to market. And that's where I think that we need to start the sustainability conversation. So, we want to get faster to market, but how do we do that? We enable digital tools, we remove a lot of the manual tasks, create efficiencies across product creation, development, merchandising. And what that does is it gives merchants, planners, creators a lot more time and space to look for innovative solutions around textile development or creation of fabrics and materials that are better for the environment. And that's exactly what we want. Increasing seasonless product or having less physical samples. I mean, I shout through the rooftops on this one. But sustainability and circularity as a whole, I would say, is a huge initiative for retailers and brands across the board.
For sure. And we're at Sourcing Journal gearing up for a June 1st event focused on sustainability, and circularity as a big topic that we'll be speaking about. I think this is a perfect segue to talk in a little bit about supply chain with Assad. So Assad, supply chain constraints, we're reading about it all the time, forcing retailers and brands to work with potentially limited inventory or pull inventory from various locations, pulling things forward, holding things. Stores might need to assort smarter. How is technology helping them in this moment? I mean, I don't know if you guys were thinking about this 2-3 years ago, maybe you were, but with the volatility that we're seeing, are you able to step in and help?
I was waiting when we would talk about supply chain, right? Because I don't think there's any hour complete in our day these days without talking about supply chain. One of the biggest things that we have seen, and this is, again, I'd be remiss if we didn't mention the last 2 years, uh, we saw a lot of disruptions in the supply chain, be it shutdowns, be it a container ship stuck in a canal, or be it the containers missing themselves, right? So that we had all of those fun challenges that happened. The biggest thing that we have been talking to our customers about are the challenges that they had on their side in terms of supply chain was not having visibility or lack of visibility, whichever way you want to call it, not having detailed reporting, not having information about their vendors, not scoring their vendors on their part, not diversifying. And I think all of those things have come to a head at the same time. And we're talking about sustainability. What we've seen is a lot of retailers go towards diversification and rather than offshoring, nearshoring their vendors at this point in time, where they were picking a lot of products from Far East Asia. Now they're looking at, hey, can we bring those products in from Africa? Also, there's been some policy changes that have happened that have also made them realize those are probably better avenues for them to bring products in. We're not talking about policy today, but that has definitely affected that part out. But the key thing that we have seen is giving retailers and pretty much anybody out there is more visibility, giving them historical data. You'll be surprised, Rebecca, when you were talking earlier, a very different topic about the opportunity to have a better returns from. You'll be surprised at how archaic reporting was for a lot of retailers. It used to be a lot of Excel. Again, I'm not a huge fan of Excel. I'm actually not a huge fan of PowerPoint either, but that's a whole other story for another day. But again, the idea being that trying to make sense of Excel, trying to use Excel as a tool to predict where you need to have your products, when you need to have them, what the assortment mix needs to be. That's definitely an art. you at this point in time, you're looking for a better solution, and that's where you need to have live actual reporting, things that you can work with, predictive reporting as well. So again, intelligence needs to be built into it. So again, a lot of those things can really help you manage your supply chain and have a better retail mix and be able to attract your customers with that.
Adam, any thoughts from, kind of how you guys are managing inventory through this kind of supply chain up and downs? I don't know, how much you guys have been struggling to bring things in or push things out. Any
Yeah,
thoughts?
how much time do we have for this panel?
I mean, we have a lot of,
No, I
we
mean,
can
just
spend
on
a
the
whole day on this.
yeah, I mean the supply chain piece. Knock on wood, we've been fairly insulated from it. Very happy that we don't make furniture or
Right.
something that has 100% exposure to boat transit. We've been able to actually leverage air. We have small, relatively compact, not super heavy products that we make abroad, with a few exceptions. So we've been okay on the supply chain front. The technology piece, the reason I'm joking is like this was essentially the last 18 months of my life and my team's life. We completely replatformed our technology, our tech stack basically. We are on NetSuite. We've been on NetSuite for 3 or 4 years. That was sort of the first major thing we did. Uh, as we were
By the way, I did
released.
not know that when we invited Marine Layer.
I know, and I
So,
don't usually do shameless plugs like that, but NetSuite, and we are very happy with NetSuite. And so we had a very sort of first gen point of sale front end inventory management that was all kind of coupled. It was actually the duct tape model, like we would cobble together like a early sort of first gen web based POS in our stores with NetSuite and some middleware in between, and it was not great. So we replatformed all of our the front end of our stores, but the primary change was essentially going to like a complete end to end seamless inventory pool. So as of about a year ago, we started shipping web orders from the back of our stores. Roughly 15 depending on where you are in the season, roughly 15 up to 20% of our e-commerce orders actually ship from the back of one of our 48 stores. So it's 100% like a work smarter, not harder. Like the best thing to do to make your inventory, so it makes all my planning team look like geniuses, because we don't strand inventory in the back of houses of a store anymore, where there might be a regional reason that this particular piece of the assortment or the season doesn't sell well in Texas regionally for some reason. We used to be 100% exposed to that just sitting in the back, and we had to do a pullback, and that's super, super laborious and very costly. Now we just have inventory people will just kind of toggle up and down and turn stuff on and off, and hey, this is now exposed to the web, and it starts going out the back door and coming, and people don't actually know they're receiving it from the back of a store. Typically, it just sort of shows up. So it was critical, COVID and the pandemic accelerated the requirement that we do that. And now it's sort of amazing that we ran our business not doing it that way before. We're just sort of like amazed when we think about it, like pre and post, like omni inventory. So.
Well, I think we don't need a SOD here then, because you can basically just sell the software.
Right.
So if you want to leave for the day and maybe, go grab a beer somewhere, I feel like you're good. But I mean, this was really I had actually a couple of questions about what Adam was just talking about, which is, I think, a perfect segue. So I'm going to jump there. So he's describing this single source of truth, right? He's talking about putting it all in one place. So, talk to me a little bit about, what, brands beyond Marine Layer can do to kind of achieve this if they're not, thinking that way. So maybe explain a little bit more what Adam was just talking about.
Definitely, right. So when you talk about a single source of the truth, the idea is being able to see all of your information, your enterprise information, now in one place. Now, one of the things you always have to remember is every department in your company needs to be interconnected. Your marketing needs to know what your supply chain looks like, what your POs look like, when they're being sent out, when they're being delivered. Because if they know when all of that is happening, they can start targeting their marketing based on that. Similarly, on the flip side of it, right? When you talk about the stores need to know when the inventory is coming in. Which other stores have the inventory? Again, I love the experience when I go to a place and they don't have what I'm looking for. They can always tell me, "Hey, you can pick it up from this other location." And being in New York City, that helps out because there tends to be another location further downtown from me in most cases. If not, they can tell me, hey, we have it available on the web and it will ship to you in the next whatever 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. And having that answer in front of me is very critical. I think when we were talking last time, when we were prepping for this webinar, we talked about this. One of the biggest things that we have seen in when it comes to customer satisfaction, right, at this point in time is it's not what the final cost of the product is. Definitely that's a factor, but when you're delivering that product to me, Adam mentioned about not. Thank God they're not in the world of furniture. I think everybody we know at some point has had that furniture a fun story in the last 2 years, right? Hey, I ordered a couch. It's been a year. It hasn't shown up, and I don't know when it's showing up. Should I just proceed to cancel this order? I say to those friends of mine, it's like, hey, floor seating is an option. But again, that's a whole other story. Um, but again, when you talk about this single source of the truth, you have to think about their single source of truth both for the customer and for your internal employees. It's very, very critical. Um, you talked, Lisa mentioned the rise of the call center. Again, when you start bringing in brand ambassadors, customer service folks, sales representatives, personalized shopping experience. Again, we have seen a lot of these larger DCs going towards that is being able to interact with the customer and saying, hey, Mr. and Miss Customer, we know you visited X, Y, and Z of our location. We know you spent as much time, not in a bad way, but we know how much time you spent on our website. These are the products that you were interested in. Oh, you had that case, you raised a support case for one of the products that you didn't enjoy. Can we improve your experience? I think one of the things that we've seen is not only omni-channel is the trend, but clienteling is also another area. And when you don't have unified system, not having that single source to the truth, that becomes a harder and harder thing. And as Lisa mentioned earlier on her part, like if you have friction anywhere in the process, your customers are more than willing to go elsewhere. You want to make yourself as sticky as possible.
And with that, I mean, I assume that there's a ton of data being surfaced in one place, and hopefully, I haven't spent a lot of time in NetSuite recently, but I assume that you're serving up really good information that the retailer or the brand can use. I'm curious, like from Adam's perspective, is it like too much information? Is it too much data? And like, how are you going about sifting through this? So now all of a sudden you've got like really powerful information in front of you. I think, a lot of people are probably getting smarter at how to interpret and read it. But, how do you feel like you're using the data, and, is it too much ever, or is it not enough, or is it not the right data?
Yes, it is sometimes too much. I'll come to bat for Excel here for a minute too, because I think Excel is still pretty good. We have sort of taken some really critical parts of our like planning and buying and like even like forecasting, like open to buy forecasting to like a platform side where we're not doing it in Excel anymore, but we still use Excel for a lot of stuff. So it is for sure. Between the different channels we have, there are 20 or 30 different KPIs and data spreadsheets and like dashboards that are getting thrown at all of the leaders of the business at all times. And there's for sure is a danger of chasing your tail on some of this stuff. And we always talk a lot about correlation versus causation with the data in our business, because you're never able to just like hold everything else constant and say, oh, right, we changed this and this one metric moved and everything else stayed the same. Stores are like human, they're like, we have 48 little children and they're all a little different and they do some things. Some convert really well, some have super high traffic, some have huge baskets. It's like they're all a little different for different reasons. So you just have to pick a few true norths, I think. LTV, we talked about that before. For our entire business, that's the one. NPS score and LTV, those are just like, they make it into every monthly board call. It's like which way is it? LTV you want up and to the right. Every cohort for every year should look healthier, and they're buying more stuff, which just means bigger baskets and more frequent. That's just like your ultimate gauge if you're merchandising well, if they're connecting with the brand, if you're messaging with them well. Like, on the website, we haven't talked much about digital acquisition. It's very much a love-hate for a brand like ours right now and our size and our growth. You need to grow digital, like you need to acquire customers through Meta. I'm still getting used to saying that. You need to be able to be active on Instagram and be able to and have a good acquisition engine there. We track fully, for any other brands that are out there. I think it's super, super important that you have a fully blended CPA on your digital platforms versus a platform-based ones, because your catalog people are going to say your CPA is this. Your digital agency is going to say your CPA is this. Invariably, they're both double counting each other and saying they're better than they are. At the end of the month, we basically say dollars out, customers in, you divide the two, and that tells you how healthy. And for us, we have to be profitable. We don't run a business that is based on some notion of like, hey, their 5-year lifetime value is this, and we're going to make this money back in the next 18 months. We expect to be right side up on acquisition. So for us, that's $60 or $70 or something like that. And if those things get out of whack, that changes our strategy within each of those platforms. So, I think you just have to pick a few. In stores, shopper yield, for what it's worth for the retailers out there, shopper yield is the only one I look at. Shopper yield is just a combination of conversion and it's basically dollars per person in the door. And it's the one that it's conversion times basket. So that, to me, like when that moves, something is not going right in the store. Like either like conversion is moving in the wrong direction, which might imply bad in-stock rates, or just they're not connecting with the merchandise, or there's something you want to talk to the team about that why that's moving, and their basket's changing, which could influence the same things. But I don't really get caught up in UPTs and all these all these just like random things. We just sort of look at that one every week and just make sure that that's healthy.
I have so much to learn about this. I bought the other day when I couldn't sleep. I got served up. I like these Model soft pajamas from the Gap, and somehow Instagram knew that. I think I probably was searching from them somewhere, and the pricing looked different on my Instagram. Like they gave me a really good sharp price, so I ordered a couple. Does the Gap know that I purchased them? Because it felt like a very different checkout experience. I didn't log into my Gap account. I used my Instagram, whatever, I don't know, credit card there. So like that's the stuff that I'm still trying to figure out as a consumer. Like who's driving that? Is it the brand or is it someone else? Because they got me, and I don't know if they know that, if the Gap knows that I purchased those pajama pants. So
yeah, my suspicion is there's a very well-oiled digital agency behind the scenes there that is able to marry up your customer profile and your shopping history and where you've been and have you been on a conversion page before, and probably change that for you. We're not quite that good to be able to do that sophisticated stuff. So you don't have to worry about us doing that to you.
It's all good. I mean, it worked. I got the pajamas I wanted, a great price. So it's all good. Lisa, Assad, anything to add to the data conversation? I know that when we prepped, you guys had a lot to say. I know that Assad, like we were talking about, understanding what customers don't buy, even abandoned items in a cart can tell us something. Stores obviously can't gather such data that they know of. How does NetSuite work with omnichannel retailers to help them understand this behavior across those channels?
Definitely, right. So when we talk about having the user behavior, it's critical for you to be able to account for all of the things that are happening, be it online, be it in store. Now, the online part, it's easy. It's easier, if I can say that. It's because, again, you can track all of the click-through rates that are happening, what's being put in the cart, what's being abandoned, what's being shopped in. Again, so that's an easy one at that point. In terms of the store part of it, stores you kind of almost have to kind of look at, as Adam mentioned, across the board. If you can take a look at how your different stores are performing, if you're a multi-store retailer, if you have different other channels, and it'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you might want to also look at other channels that you're selling through, uh, and bringing them into the fold of the conversation as well, be it marketplaces, be it third-party retailers. With the rise of the consignment stores, I think we have seen that quite a bit as well, and seeing which products are moving. And if you're able to collect and gather the data, Adam mentioned in their part that they're doing this quite a bit right now, is asking for the email addresses for the receipts and then being able to track it beyond that. It's critical to do that part. Again, asking for the shopper information is going to be critical for you to be able to come up with the demographics information in terms of how they're buying, what they're buying, and when they're buying.
Lisa, from your perspective, with your clients, like, how do you know if they have the right tech stack? Like, what are you seeing from their perspective?
Well, that's a good question because I work with a lot of merch planning and product creation teams. So just seeing their entire, concept to market calendar and their line plan, if they haven't enabled digital tools, I know that there's a problem because that means they're doing a lot of manual work. In most cases, a lot of Excel. Sorry, Adam. But, Excel was definitely the bane of any merchant planner's existence. So if we're not helping merchant planners to use better tools or invest in innovative and digital tools to help them better predict what to buy, where to put it, right place, right time, etc., then I think that's a big problem. The pandemic definitely put planners in a spotlight because they weren't able to react to customer shifts. They weren't able to move product around. And that comes back to real-time visibility of inventory. And it's not only an inventory problem, it's actually a technology problem. The fact is, many retailers, have put duct tape on their tech stack, but also the big enterprise retailers, it takes them 3 years to do a digital transformation. So that means they're just not moving fast enough. And the other thing I've seen, and I worked with one of the biggest performance sportswear brands in the world, a big campus in Portland. And what I found was, it was amazing how innovative they were, and that other brands could actually learn from how they've implemented tools like digital product creation, like digital twins, 3D printing on campus versus, going back and forth to China or Asia or wherever for sample development. So I think that the opportunities are there, but we need to really focus on merch planning and product creation. Traditionally, I find that a lot of the technology investment, it's from this like ivory tower of IT folks that are looking at, okay, what's going to be best for the whole business, but let's break down those silos and understand what is the product journey, because at the end of the day, it all comes down to product, and product is what will delight customer, which will equal to full price sales.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we're getting close to time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's day. I know people are busy, but I do see a bunch of questions coming in. Sorry, we were not able to get to all of them. They're all great, and really appreciate the engagement from the audience. I think it would be fun to end with one final question, kind of bringing us back to where we started. And I'd love to hear from each of our panelists about what their predictions or what their vision is for channels going forward. So, what do they see in terms of brick and mortar and e-commerce? Do you think brick and mortar will continue to see it grow? Will we see new channels? Does anyone want to talk about the metaverse potentially as a new channel that we need to consider? I am not prepared to talk about that. So if you do not want to, please please omit that. But there's a lot of things happening, and I'm just curious, like, what's your gut say? We won't put you on record. I mean, maybe Sourcing Journal will write about it, but eager to hear. Lisa, do you want to start?
Yes, I think that the physical store is absolutely important, but the physical store must have a purpose. So I think we need to get away from, looking at the store as an endless aisle, because that is not what it should be. It should never be that. It should be part of a community. It should speak to the customer, and it should delight customers with product. I don't think we need to inundate the customer with either, on one side, a showroom experience only, or an overfilled store with like all this inventory that makes no sense. I think we need to think about it from the customer experience, their journey as they, shop online and go to the store, and how seamless it is, and that it should be part of the holistic brand message. And aligning with customer values is key.
Adam, thoughts?
Yeah, we experienced a pretty significant channel shift after the pandemic. As the pandemic started, and I think it'd be ridiculous to say that isn't part of that is not sticky, right? E-commerce for us isn't going anywhere. The unit economics are really attractive, 30 plus contribution margins per dollar spent on there, and that's a for sure a good thing. I would just echoing those sentiments. We're very bullish on retail. Our retail as a fleet is experiencing very significant growth post pandemic. We're looking at like 20 to 25% on pre-pandemic levels, like same store sales comps on. So these are like either, depending on where you're measuring, 2 or 3 year stacks. And we're trying very specifically to drive growth in the retail side, and 100% agree on the experience part. We believe very strongly in having inventory in there, and we do endless aisles through our platform there now as well, and which is essentially an inventoryless sale. I get nervous when those get above 10%. They typically are like 5 to 7% on a weekly basis. I don't like them over 10% because that means we actually don't have the inventory there. I don't want that to be the experience. I want to sort of surprise and delight and have them be able to see and touch and feel our product and have an experience. And we're opening stores. We'll open 4 to 6 new stores this year, so we're active in the market. So yeah, I think retail is going to continue to have a good year, and it's a little more topsy-turvy on e-commerce too, especially with the acquisition stuff and some of after they did the iOS platform shift last year, like no one has the visibility they used to have. And it's a little squirrely on knowing how hard you can push on the digital acquisition stuff right now. So
Assad, perfect timing. I'm glad you came back. Final thoughts about channel growth, e-commerce, stores, metaverse. Like, what are your predictions? We won't hold you accountable, but we might. Oh, I think you're on mute. Maybe. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's go with metaverse and some NFTs for the conversation, right? Let's have some fun with that. Yeah, I think that I mentioned this, alluded to this earlier. Channel growth is definitely going to happen more and more as we see it. Diversification is going to be key for retailers to grow. Because we've kind of talked about this theme the entire time, right? Customers have a habit of not sticking to just one way of doing business with you. Today they're going to visiting you in store. Tomorrow they're going to go online. And also as a retailer, you want to have your presence everywhere. So being omnipresent or meta present, I think that's the term for these days now. So being at the department stores, being in the social world, being in the metaverse that's coming down the pipe for us. So again, having your presence is going to be critical. So that's where I sat on that one. It's like growth is coming, and you got to be ready for it.
I love it. So with that, I think we can wrap things up. I want to thank NetSuite, Marine Layer, Lisa, for all joining today. Really great conversation. Could spend all day talking about this, but I've got a sourcing supply chain event to plan, and I think you guys all have a lot of work to do. So with that, thanks, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
See ya.